Hi there, Reuben here for Native Instruments, and in this track breakdown I'm going to be using Scoring Collection 2 from Heavyocity to construct a hard-hitting hybrid cinematic cue. This comprehensive selection of tools are all Contact Player libraries with full NKS compatibility. Here's a quick clip of the cue. I'll play the track in full at the end of the video. The libraries I've used here are a small selection from Heavyocity: Gravity, Mosaic Pluck, Mosaic Voices, and two slimmed down versions of their full string and brass collections, NOVO Essentials and FORZO Essentials. All of these libraries have a wide variety of both organic and hybrid sounds, even the strings and brass, where although the original recordings are of traditional orchestral sections, there is some amazing processing going on to mutate these samples into twisted sound design patches. There's no complex routing or external effects, just a mastering plugin on the final mix to provide some EQ shaping, compression, stereo imaging and limiting. But I'll bypass that plugin for now. The great thing about Heavyocity instruments is that for the most part, the sounds they produce are mix-ready, highly polished and ready to drop straight into your own productions. There's also a similar layout for most of the libraries here, with only Gravity being markedly different. I'll come on to that a little later. So let's get to it. Let's start with one of Heavyocity's newer libraries, Mosaic Pluck. The source samples here are acoustic plucked instruments, so think harps, violin, basses and such like. Along with synth tones, and additional attack layers. These are loaded into a 3-layer engine just here, with a huge variety of parameters available across the top, including basic mixing, envelope control, options for key mapping, arpeggios, macro sequencing, and master effects. Even with cues that have relatively delicate orchestration, like the start of this one, I like to introduce some kind of pulsing element, however subtle. This indicates the rhythmic feel of the track in advance of the more obvious percussive elements coming in later. In fact, you can see how the arpeggios are running for layers 1 and 2. I've also tied the central macro control here to the envelope and filter and automated it with the mod wheel. Another way to control the macros is with the macro sequencer. You can see that in operation in this track. It's controlling the drive parameter, thickening up the sound very subtly. Throughout this cue, I've mostly used carefully chosen presets for most parts. This is to show how quick and easy it is to create a track using these building blocks. Thanks to the NKS system, previewing the 120 presets of Mosaic Plucks is pretty easy. The preset I've chosen for the melody here is a mutated prepared piano. And the only change I've made is switching on the delay in the master effects and slightly adjusting the feedback, dampening and amount of delay. Mosaic Voices uses the same engine as Mosaic Plucks, with 130 snapshot presets, using source sounds of human vocalizations, choirs, synthetic synth voice pads, and more. Again, you can demo the snapshots using the handy NKS system. This particular track uses a hybrid preset with 3 layers of synthetic voice. For this track, I've adjusted the pitch bend slowly downwards for a dramatic sigh of drama. The next track contains more standard vocals, this time staccato R sounds. Honestly, they sound a little bit goofy when they're playing on their own, but when paired with the low strings in another track, they blend quite nicely to give some punch and add character. This track utilises an effect that I've been using since writing my very first music back in the 1990s, a gated choir. This kind of sound is perfect for lending a human touch to a cue, but introduces more interest than just long sustained notes. Here the 3-layer choir patch sings an R vowel, and you can hear it if I go into the gate macro controls and switch off the gating. There's also a little bit of rhythmic action going on in the ARP panel. This patch goes hand in hand with the gated synth groove provided by Gravity on track 1. With each panned either left or right to widen the effect. For the more fragile beginning of the cue, the high sustained oo vowels are the way to go. Even though this sound only has one dynamic recorded for the vocals, clever EQing linked to the central macro control and mod wheel can introduce subtle timbral changes. It's easy to change the range and depth of any of these macro parameters, making a preset your own. Just click and drag the dials here. Let's move on to the strings, which are at the heart of this cue. All of the strings are from NOVO Essentials, a slimline version of the full package NOVO Modern Strings. This is a 50-piece string section recorded at Warner Brothers Studios, containing essential articulations, rhythmic loops, and mutated hybrid timbres. Whilst I was writing the cue, I found these collections of loops very inspirational. This particular track does a lot of the heavy lifting, with those pre-recorded tempo-synced loops. These performances are triggered across the keyboard and can be transposed into any root key. Have a listen to this single string track in isolation. I've been a bit more creative than just repeating the same loops all the time, but there's still not an awful lot of programming to create this driving backbone. So as you can see, it's very simple to start creating complex string arrangements by just laying down a few notes. Much of this is straight out of the box, with only a slight tweak to the reverb settings just here. Moving on, in a similar way to the loop designer, the string designer contains complex articulations and hybrid transformations, playable across the keyboard. In this case, I've used several different effects to balance the low end of the cue. Just like the Mosaic instruments, you can program macros to move multiple parameters at the same time. You'll see this throughout the playback. Another hybrid track using the string designer, this time layering 3 different string effects on top of one another. Here they are individually. And played together. The exact same motif plays using a standard sustain articulation with the full ensemble. I really love layering the natural sound of strings with hybrid tones derived from the original recordings. It can sound really magical. Even though NOVO Essentials contains only 4 standard articulations, sustain, tremolo, staccato and pizzicato, you can get a great deal of mileage out of playing through the dynamic layers and switching them in and out. You can even change the round robin playback behaviour and bow direction just here. Have a listen to the standard orchestral tracks soloed. FORZO Essentials is a cut-down version of FORZO, Heavyocity's flagship brass collection. Encompassing traditional brass, hybrid tones and brass loops, it's very much in the same vein as NOVO, touching on many different types of brass playing styles. This track contains lots of different traditional articulations, from sustains to crescendi and flutter tonguing. To tie the strings and brass together, I've made sure that they both have the same reverb settings. The designed brass loops are perfect for this kind of dramatic scoring, with deep tones and a throaty, raspy feel. I've used a few different ones on these 2 tracks. So that's it for the majority of the melodic instruments, but I want to quickly flick back to the top 3 tracks and show off some sounds from Gravity. Even though it's a few years old now, Gravity is still a firm favourite amongst composers and features in many of my own templates. This is a huge modern scoring collection of hits, pads, rises and stings. They're powerful and flexible. With over 2,000 sound sources and 1,200 custom presets, you'll easily find inspiration here. Find the sounds that you need by browsing NKS presets using the filtering tags. You could probably construct an entire cue just using sounds from Gravity, but I like to use the sounds as seasoning, dropping them in here and there for added colour and drama. In this cue, I've used the gating control to chop up a synth pad in track 1. There are a variety of tonal sweeps featured in track 2, all locked to the correct key using the pink key range just here. Although technically there's no traditional style percussion within Gravity, you can use the subhits, impacts, tails and whooshes to put together rhythmic backing. There are lots of patches with these kinds of sounds mapped across the keyboard. What's cool is that each can have its parameters adjusted individually to suit your own use. For example, I've EQ'd this impact so that it sounds like a big drum. And I've adjusted the release time of this whoosh tail so that it stops abruptly, becoming a kind of dramatic riser. You can make all these kinds of changes without affecting the playback of the other samples in the patch. One final mention for the punish and twist knobs just here. And these often feature in the other libraries too. For this track, I've automated throughout to progressively destroy the sound as the track builds. So that's the basics of how I put this cue together. I've tried to use as few tracks as possible, and I could probably go on tweaking automation and levels for a little while longer, but it's a sketch and it's about 95% of the way there, so I'm happy to leave it. Some very light mastering is provided by Isotope's Ozone, as it's a great tool to get a good idea of what a professional mastering job would sound like, all in one plugin. Hopefully that's given a small insight into my composition process. To learn more about Heavyocity's scoring collection too, head to the NKS shop over at nativeinstruments.com. Thanks for watching, and here's the cue in full.